Exactly. If it doesn't have at least one of those, it doesn't count as art. If it's not creative, it's not art. It's crap. It's not art.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. We're excited to have you back. Today, we're talking about AI slop and also the algorithms that rule our world and the consequences of them, both good and bad, and also some of the ways in which that may change to some extent in the future because of certain things. But in all likelihood, it's going to get worse. We talked about this last time a little bit when we talked about the differences between the forces of human morality versus the forces of money. Algorithms really are very well aligned with the forces of money in terms of ruling the world, because as we discussed last time, money is a kind of objective thing, and everybody can agree that if money go up, we happy. So it is easy for us to build algorithms to make money go up, but they are undesirable in many ways, and especially when you have multiple algorithms all trying to make money go up and create local optimizations for money go up, it creates bigger problems in the whole system. Certainly for long term, even for money go up proponents. So we're going to talk about some of this today, and we're excited to have you. But yeah, if you're tired of AI slop, we hope that this will bring some relief. With that, I would like to introduce Igor and Yosef, our usual guests. Gentlemen, anybody who want to come in and contribute?
Hello.
At least this isn't controversial so far.
The
Exactly.
intro might have been, but the two of you are doing great so far today.
3, 2, 1. Okay.
So, I mean, many of us have seen AI slop, right? We've seen impossible videos. I saw a video of like a human child sort of going into a well, and then its dog running home and then bringing something and coming to save that child. With like a superhero, and it was very, very funny. Or there was one in which a little cat's like a parent got murdered, and then the cat grew up and avenged the parent, all generated with AI. Very comical, but there have been times where sometimes it can be a little bit make-believe. As like sometimes it's hard to tell, but it's a little strange, right? Because we like short-form content on social media is about the unusual, and AI fits very nicely into that. So we're seeing kind of this, and also, of course, scams, which I think we'll cover at another time. They're also being propagated by AI and algorithmic stuff. And there was also something recently around Google published a report a few days ago about this virus that essentially is being worked on that can change itself, its signature, on the fly every few seconds. It's very, very hard to recognize. So we're going to see also in this age of algorithms, and it's like, in biology, Richard Dawkins has this idea of the selfish gene. The idea basically is that the gene is the primary unit of selection. Now, that idea does happen to be controversial, but it's a novel idea, right? That the gene is the unit of selection amongst life, and showing that. Now, if we look in the digital ecosphere, and we say like what would be the replicators of digital life, right? There might be these assortment, like if you see LLM as a collection of like subroutines that can solve problems, like that yes, sometimes you need the whole LLM, let's say, but if you look at like attention, especially with the mixture of experts architecture, which is what DeepSeek used, and you have this multi-head latent stuff. Essentially, you're only activating like 19 million parameters of like of some billion or something. Like you are activating a small percentage of the parameters, and that is very much a subroutine that is being called to solve certain problems. Which is also to say, while these LLMs that are being trained for AGI are very general learning algorithms, they often need subroutines just to solve problems. So if you look at these algorithmic subroutines as the constituents of digital minds and perhaps of digital life, then you can look at these. What would digital life look like? I think one of the concerns we're going to have is algorithms run amok, and also perhaps AI. Now, there's one scenario of the Terminator. That's one scenario. There's another scenario of these lifeless things like viruses that can create mayhem and really strange replications. And we will likely see that. And to me, that's what the Google paper indicated. So I think it's a very fertile topic, this one. And there's a lot of angles we could take. But there is in the culture, in the zeitgeist, which is a German word that Joseph can say better than I can. In the zeitgeist, there is people are getting tired of algorithms and AI slop, because it does follow these. You could do this task, compare a question you have, ask like 5 LLMs and get very similar responses. You'll see there's this convergence towards this it's always, you're always tending to the center point, the mean of the distribution, right? And so all of these different optimization functions converge at these different means based on what questions you've asked, right? The different domains. And so it's creating kind of a vista of regurgitated repetitiveness in our world. And I think that is what people mean when they talk about AI slop, and that's something that I think we should and can talk about. So with that, I hope to have roused our guests more to participate.
Let's see. The one thing that you said, the AI converges to the mean. That is something that I've found for myself about a year ago, when I was starting to work on a little. How do you have that in the English language countries? Adventskalender, a countdown calendar towards Christmas, with a little present on the 1st, on the 2nd, 3rd, and so on of December. And my wife had said she would like to have one of these with crime short stories. That was just when I had discovered LLMs for myself. So I figured, okay, I can do that. I'll write 25 short stories in one evening. And actually it was very, very interesting to figure out what works and what doesn't. And one of the side effects was, from my own discovery of what you just said, Sheikh, that the AI always converges to the mean. I mean, in a way, the mechanism behind all of that, the training mechanisms, are statistical mechanisms. Where else should they converge but the mean? And that means if you want to create an interesting story, you can depend on the AI building the mainstream scaffolding around an interesting plot. But if you want to have an interesting plot, you have to do that plot yourself. And now, the catch is, if you go into any reasonable company report, unless they have something extraordinarily cool to report, people avoid an interesting plot in a company report by all means possible. And an AI is a really nice tool for that. A few years ago, I was talking about a lawyer who wanted to use the early versions of ChatGPT for his legal writing. And the outcome was that when in the ping pong game between the lawyers on opposite sides, they used to have 50 pages of documents that go back and forth, and then they would ask their assistant to summarize, and then they would ask their assistant to craft a reply. Now they wouldn't ask their assistant. Now they would ask an AI, and instead of 50 pages reports, they would send 500 pages reports. But bottom line is, now one guy talks to his AI, give me a 500-page report with the following 5 points, and hide these points as skillfully as you can. And the other guy would ask his own AI, make me a summary and dig out all the hidden points so that I understand what he means. And what you really have is a list of 5 bullet points on either end.
Yeah, I saw this. I think there's a lot of really great points, but of course there's a whole, but this is more of a sociological point around, like, people in big companies want to hype because it's a loss aversion culture. And I think there's a big question about whether big companies are going to survive. They are they're a product of the Industrial Revolution, where we could have scale en masse. Like, it was very profitable to have industrialized production. But I think that big companies may not survive in the world of AI, because the economics and the landscape for companies' existence will change significantly. I think the big advantage big companies will have is like trust, but I don't think they have agility. So I think like the sociology of big companies is important. I think that is an interesting subject, but I don't think that's the main point here. I think there is something. So around the mean, of course, you can prompt it to like write like J.K. Rowling, or write like H.P. Lovecraft. You can get it to like you can give it a different distribution to pick the mean out of, right? But even then, it is not producing truly novel things. Like, it is at best doing, to me, it's still doing interpolation. It's not really like coming up with new. And when it does come up with new, it's more like a randomized kind of just pulling stuff from, but which is maybe a lot of human creativity does feel like it's just like, if you look at freestyle rap, is there true novel insight there, or is it just like I think that's an interesting question. But like what Igor talked about before we started recording is this concept of authorial intent. That when you have a piece of text that you're analyzing, there's some intent that the author has. And that gets lost no matter which way you use these algorithms, that there is kind of that the machine is not truly intelligent. It's not truly having insights. And there is nothing there to read between the lines of, you know, in a true sense. And that there is something when a human writes or says something to read between the lines of, that is important and meaningful. And I don't know if it's true, but I will say that, we have seen a homogenization of our whole culture, not just with these algorithms. There's a homogenization of our music, of our food, right? It's all fat and sugar, right? Of like every kind of activity that we do, we've seen a homogenization of it, and kind of a dumbing down, and going for like the brain stem, like the lowest common denominator kind of stuff, right? I heard this from somewhere, but like, the most famous minds of our generation are like busy figuring out how to make people like click on an ad or whatever, right? Or linger for 0.2 seconds longer on a certain page, rather than like building rockets to the moon, or like, rather than solving serious big challenges. So I think there is like something big that actually happened in our world that has created this sort of like mainstream cultural homogenization, in a way that has really rendered us functionally illiterate, inattentive, right, and unthoughtful. Like very intellectually lazy. And I think at the heart of that is algorithms and AI slop, and these things that are optimizing for consumptive patterns based on our brain activities. So I think that's like something a lot of us have observed. Would you guys agree with this?
Let me add to that. In terms of creativity, and in terms of, and which specifically leads us to education and train of thought, let's call it that way. We once had a project, like a request. We didn't even do it. We just had a request for a project. Just to remind, I am part of a software modernization and development company. There was like a teacher from some middle school somewhere asking us if we could create a software that will generate basically tasks and mathematical problems and tasks and other subjects for the students, so it could simplify their work, so that they would just ask basically ChatGPT to generate something for them, and it would do it, so make some agent for that. And the first thing which I thought about that, okay, you are making tasks for them with ChatGPT and they're going to be answering it. answering it with ChatGPT. So why exactly humans need it in this equation? Yeah. But again, the teacher's intent is absolutely clear. That's a very actual business case, because then the teacher needed to write all this stuff themselves, right? And spend their time. They need to have certain level of education for that, certain level of skill, experience, so on and so forth. They need to create those mathematical, whatever other problems. And now they just ask the algorithm to do it. So now they can save time and just do some other stuff. That's cool. Sounds cool. But students may think same stuff, right? Now we're just gonna use ChatGPT to do this. And now, like we all do now, for example, like we are writing business emails often using ChatGPT. What happens? We forget the skill of writing business emails, literally, or forget the skills of grammar, because we have Grammarly, which is a great tool, undoubtedly, and it solves a very real life problem. But you using Grammarly all the time, or whatever, ChatGPT, whatever other software you use to fix your mistakes, you become less literate. Like literally, you become less literate, and it makes us sloppier and lazier. Again, we need to, like, what is writing? Writing is your train of thoughts, essentially. When you are learning how to write an essay, you are learning to structurize your thoughts. You're learning to outline your thoughts in something comprehensive, something structured, something clear, concise, so on and so forth. If you are only using ChatGPT for that, you forget the skill. So it takes us to the question that, apart from AI doing sloppy work and literally just triggering us to pay attention to it, like everything, it's used basically to trigger us to pay attention to the ad, to trigger us watching some kind of movie where the script was obviously AI generated, or it was just copied if not AI generated, and names were changed. But apart from AI getting sloppier, we as humans using it extensively for our daily activities, which requires our computational capacity and some efforts, we also get sloppier, because now we lose all those skills. And to maintain writing skills, you need to write. To maintain the ability to create proper arguments and be able to create complex logical structures, you need to do it from time to time. And if you are not using the skill, and if you have some kind of magic helper that basically does it for you and makes all the logical sequences for you and makes all the tables for you and structures the work for you, you lose that skill. Again, it's not the question that we shouldn't do that. Obviously, it solves a very serious business case, but it has its cons.
I think the key question is, how are we using that? I mean, the idea of Pulp Fiction predates AI by 30, 40, 50 years. So it's not really new. And if you look at it, you will discover that in the age of Pulp Fiction, the vast majority of people didn't write stories or anything like that. Most people didn't even write company reports or emails or anything like that. So in a way, we're talking about a luxury problem. Now, let's go back to that crime short story topic. That was intentionally a pulp, basically a Pulp Fiction approach. I knew that AI can do a certain line of things, and I knew that AI cannot do a certain type of things. So by hanging the ambitions low towards the Pulp Fiction area, it went on quite nice. But it was so much fun to work on these stories that for the next half year or so, I didn't read, but actually I used the AI for writing. I was writing my own stuff, and reading what the AI made out of my thoughts was as interesting as reading some of the best novels that the 20th century has on offer. Now, what I did based on that short story thing is just what I had outlined. I'm good at coming up with crazy ideas. One or the other may have figured that one out by now. And then I hand the crazy idea off to the AI and let the AI do the middle of the road stuff around that. And that was a lot of fun. And unfortunately, I had to abandon some of those ideas because I didn't have the time for that. But you may also realize I'm quite a philosophical mind. So when the grand idea, the intention of my storytelling is on the philosophical level, whether the person falls down in the street because we need something weird to happen at that point in time, actually, I don't care much about. A friend of mine is writing crime stories. He used to be a policeman, and his ambition was to portray the life of a policeman as accurately as possible. And he says when he tries to do that with an AI, it's an absolute catastrophe. Because the AI is, let's call it, the AI is polluted in that respect, not by actual accurate police reports, but by imagined police reports from volumes of pulp fiction crime stories. So you can make a lot of interesting stuff out of AI writing and out of AI creativity in general, but you have to find a division of labor between what you do with the AI and what you do yourself. And you need to have an ambition that actually matches that division of labor model, because otherwise you're getting straight into the woods.
How many philosophers does it take to change a light bulb?
It has taken me 30 years, but by now I can do it.
None. Cogito ergo sum.
Yeah, basically, it's the question of. It looks kind of similar in terms of writing stories with AI. It looks kind of similar with handmade and mass-produced products. It's like
Yes.
you can have a handmade product which is not used with industrial equipment, and it can have some flaws, but it's handmade, and you appreciate the fact that it's handmade. Or you can have something mass-produced, literally, like in this situation, like using the tools, and there is like almost no human intent or human involvement whatsoever, and it may be of good quality in terms of grammar, structure of sentences, maybe structure of text, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's just a stamp, like something like that. It's not more than that. But on the other hand, if you like it and if you see something deep there, then it raises the questions how much we as human need actually to see in the story to empathize with that. Maybe we're a little bit more simple than we thought.
No, I think that's really good. So, like, to me, the distinction here is the distinction between the form of a novel versus the actual intent of I'm going to convey something deep through a novel, right? The novel is a medium, the form is a medium for expression, right? The form is not the expression. And when we have like AI, which is very good at form, right? We can mistake that for genuine expression, right? And to me, it's not. And then the question is like, what is genuine expression? Where does it come from, right? Like, what is kind of an like how does the spirit of the artist express itself, right? Because it's not the words, it's what's behind the words. But yeah, like it's kind of like, to me, it's like, yeah, I think there is a level of like, yeah, art is all about the originality of the creation of it. Like it's all about the intent, and it's our art is not about mass producing it in a factory. That's, we call that, like mechanized production. We have lots of it. It's very high quality. Some of it can be artistic in many ways. But like, to me, AI is a good replicator, right? It's very good at replicating. And if we look at the history of human technology, a lot of that has to do actually with replication, right? It's like we can replicate things and then we can scale up the replication, and that's significant. It's not all replication for sure. Like we have infrared vision through technology. We're not replicating human vision, but once you've invented that, or like, physicists just discovered certain things, we then can replicate that through engineering and bring it to functional use, which I think is very cool. But yeah, replication is not origination, right? And I don't know what origination is and where it comes from. But I think we think it matters. I think we think it matters that there is an original voice. And I find that fascinating.
Yeah. Well, let's turn that upside down. When that AI stuff really went big, half a year or a year ago, everybody found it totally fascinating that an AI can write, for example, a newspaper article on a certain topic in a way that humans can barely distinguish it from original human writing.
Yes.
Nobody thought about it the other way around. If a machine that does nothing other than patterns all the way down can write a newspaper article, or, for example, a 100-page report on any political topic you like, I'm refusing to list one, because it works for almost any political topic anyways. If an AI can create a 100 pages report on a political topic that is indistinguishable from what humans write, what does that tell us about the original human voice that is behind that political topic? It's not as original as everybody claims. And we have very few. I mean, what do politicians do these days? There have been, earlier we've spoken about Churchill, for example. Churchill was original, no doubt about that. But politicians nowadays, by and large, behave like an AI. They follow the statistics.
Well, they do. They do a lot of polling and things like this. That's all correct.
They basically do extended marketing campaigns through with their actions. So they respond to whatever triggers their audience, their population, and try to make the most straightforward, clear, and obvious accommodation in order to trigger a little bit more happiness in their population. That's what they do. So, and by the way, if to take it back a few steps back to the question of creativity, but it's totally refers to politics. That which, if you are just responding to whatever triggers, to whatever the person to whatever triggers the person, to whatever the person reacts to, that's not a vision. So the difference here is like when you are using a very sophisticated tool, but still a tool which just uses statistics to find the most appropriate and the most straightforward and data supported solution. That's not about the vision, however bad or good it sounds. That's about that's like scripts of the movies which show you every time same stuff and don't risk doing anything different. That like using such an approach, you cannot get a new outstanding product which is a breakthrough. For example, you can.
It's basically the equivalent of Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That is Pulp Fiction. Absolutely. And politicians do the same stuff. There is no vision here. And exactly. By the way, if we take back to the question of author's intent and creativity, here's the definition of art. So the definition of art, the primary definition, highlights the human use of creativity and skill to produce works. And I've heard a little bit different definition. I believe it was Oxford definition, maybe not. That creativity is art is creative expression of authors' ideas with skill. It's very important. Creative expression of authors' ideas with skill. So
you're saying
if
the
it's
stuff
only
I
creative,
do because it doesn't have skill, doesn't count as art.
Exactly. If it doesn't have at least one of those, it doesn't count as art. If it's not creative, it's not art. For example, it can be creative expression, but without skill. It's crap. It's not art. We know what we're talking about here, right? Expression with skill, but there is no creative idea. That's exactly what AI is doing. It's expression with skill. It can do it with skill. It can make a report with skill. Okay, report is not art. It can make a picture. You said you made a prompt to ChatGPT to draw me a picture, and it makes a picture, but it's not art because there is no creative idea of the author. It is just the algorithmic representation of the prompt.
Which basically means if I'm using an AI, I'm skillful in using an AI and I bring in the idea, the creative idea, then suddenly the AI becomes a tool of art, and the output becomes art.
Technically, it may. Technically, it may.
But if I just go to the AI and say, write me a 150-page crime novel playing in the Northern Sea between Germany and Great Britain, that sells well, that I can sell, for example, as a periodical to a newsletter, to a newspaper, then it is not art, because there is no creative intent.
It's the same stuff as if, let's say, you are an extremely skillful developer and you can actually make code generation tools work and write something decent, not to whatever it does to 99.9% of other developers. You can say that it's a skill at the level of art. Yeah, you can say so. Absolutely. It's the same as you draw Mona Lisa with paint. I mean, paint in Windows. Like, Paint, the drawing the drawing tool in Windows, you're not supposed to use it for that purpose, but you can do it. You can learn to do it. Then you can say that Paint in Windows is my tool, and I express my creative idea with that tool, and my skill is so high that with this pretty mediocre tool, I can express such a complex creative idea. Yeah, you can say so. But again, it takes the skill, it takes the idea, and it takes the author intention, and it takes creativity.
Mm-hmm. Now, a long time ago, I had a friend who called herself an artist, and she said whenever somebody comes around the corner and says, I have defined what art is, an artist is going to come and do the opposite and call it art with a certain justification, which goes back to what Jake said earlier. Where is that creative idea? What makes something original? We can get very original stuff out of any AI, not because it has an original idea. It's just recombining, regurgitating the stuff that we put into it in a new way, like the famous billion monkeys, except that these billion monkeys are following billions of rules, and by following billions of rules, stuff comes out that is indistinguishable from stuff artists have created. And now the question is, where are we?
So I think I have a good point here. So I think first point is that AI is like a ghostwriter. The best way to use AI is like a ghostwriter. Okay, your ideas, your original, very specific points, very unique insights, and then you have it write it for you. And I do that because I'll just give it an audio of me talking about things I wanted to say, and then I have it write it for me. Okay, so that's like a ghostwriter function. Now here's the thing: we all have a feeling, I think, that a book written by somebody's ghostwriter is not the same as written by them, right? It's not exactly the same thing, which is why many people hide and have used to hide that they did use a ghostwriter, because they don't want people to think that somebody else wrote it for them, right? So there's many examples of this. Now, what happens there? When you have a ghostwriter, you're separating the sort of the core ideas from the expression of those ideas. Without a ghostwriter, you both have the ideas and you select each word of how to say them, right? And that's very laborious. It takes a long time. It takes years for people to write a good book, right? But the end product is that every word in there meets the authorial intent, meets the originator's intent. So it carries that insight through in that entire medium. Take another example. There have been many good books that have been turned into movies by, ghost, not writers, but like producers, right? Like not the author themselves. And we've seen many times the movie does not live up to the to the book, with rare exceptions. And that is the same phenomena: is that the person doing the translating work, the person speaking on behalf of, does not really get the original intent, right? This is also why people don't want to read translations and dubs, especially if they were not translated by the author, because something of the essence is lost in that process, even if it's by a very skilled human. And I think AI is worse than a very skilled human in these respects, in many senses. It cannot sit down and interview you and get a sense of who you are and then and then write on your behalf. So I think at best it's used like a ghostwriter, but it will use the tried and true, like it will not be a novelist. It will be a rather and it will rather be kind of a trite sort of novelist, right? It will more in that direction, at least the form. And if Michelangelo's David was a sculpture that he had conceived on paper as like a very rough sketch, but he never made David in its exquisite detail, it would not be considered a masterpiece the same way it is today. There's something of that laboriousness and that painstaking detail that actually produce a finished piece of art, right? Like Da Vinci with his, Da Vinci had a lot of sketches that he never made into either. But then he's made like, a half a dozen or whatever painting, like not that many, but they're all considered amazing. Because of the degree of depth and detail he used. So that inseparability of form with expression, like that, the idea with the form and stuff like that. AI, of course, kind of breaks that, and that has its benefits, huge benefits. We can all do stuff that only was accessible to like I can make better paintings than I ever could before with AI images. Like of course it gives me abilities I never had, but it does not. Yeah, it's an appendage. It's not a true, like, it's like a it's a prosthetic, more like a prosthetic. It's not a true arm. And like a prosthetic, it can do a lot of things, but it doesn't have all the feeling, all the nuance, all the actual life of an arm. So
yeah, you as a human being, like we as human beings, we like to empathize with others. And when you're appreciating handmade stuff, that's essentially what you do. You empathize with the amount of work, skill, imagination, creativity involved in the creation of that piece of art, whatever it is, and you value it specifically because of that, not because of the how well it's made. Because whatever metal press can make 10 million copies of this stuff, but you will not appreciate the copy the same way as you appreciate the original, for example. That's why in collector, like when you are a collector, for example, when you have the original one and a copy, you obviously want the original. And when you're speaking about AI, that's a press. That's a very customizable press. Yeah, but that's a press because you do not empathize with the mathematical algorithms, which gives you the most optimal result. The result can be great. It can be better than whatever you can write, but you don't empathize with it. You do not appreciate it because you don't feel this, you can say, like soul human connection with the author when you understand apprehending this piece of art, trying to understand and feeling it, touching it, reading it, observing it, whatever. You become like, you feel it becoming part of you, or you becoming part of that, and you appreciate and again empathize with the efforts, creativity, and skill involved in this. With AI, it doesn't exist because you don't empathize with a mathematical algorithm. Yes. A very good example of that is maybe not very good. I remember when I was a kid, and I went to my dad's work, and they had a Photoshop, some kind of first versions of Photoshop, end of 90s. And you could take a picture, apply some filters, warp it. It looked so cool. It looked like posters. It looked whatever. And it took me the whole minute to do it. And like, look at my art. It's not art. It's just me messing with the filters of a computer program. It's like, yeah, it looks cool, but there's no creativity. There's no intent there. There's no skill involved in creation of that. I just played with the filters. Literally just clicked mouse a few times. Yeah, with time I learned to use them better. It was not still creative skill, not even close to that. And when you are speaking about the output of AI, like creative output, like novels, pictures, so on, that's exactly what it is. It looks cool, but there is no human connection. So
can I say one thing?
You don't really care about it.
So I know, Joseph, you want to say something. So to me, like, there's the halo effect we have around like original works, right? It's like there's this halo effect. Or this was like the bat that this person used to hit a home run in this match, or this is the exact basketball that, this is a basketball Michael Jordan used in this last game, right? So
Yeah.
stuff like that. So there's that halo effect around that item, right? I think that's interesting facet of human psychology. I don't know if it's of essence in this discussion for me. I think what's at essence is there something like a little bit measurable that we can say distinguishes like human works from AI works? And I would say, look, one opinion is that humans are also algorithmic things like AI is. It's just that there are many of us, there's like 8 billion plus of us, and each of us is trained a little differently. We're all analog computers, we're all a little bit unique. So of course, human artists are going to have much more uniqueness across the board, like in aggregate. Okay. So you would say that if you take one human and one AI model, the AI model would maybe be more novel. For example, that's one hypothesis, right? If you another hypothesis is that there is something truly still there is at least a difference of degree and perhaps of kind between like the kind of there's a cohesion, there's a coherence, there's something that we can say that there's a self-consciousness in human creation and human works that allows us to believe that that what was done with intention, and that if we were to understand that intention, it would lead to some insight that is valuable. I think that hypothesis to me it still stands in contrast to what AI can do.
It's your turn, Joseph.
So basically, you're making the Turing test of art. If you get two pieces that claim to be art, and one is from a computer and the other one is from a human, can an unbiased observer distinguish the two and assign them correctly? Now, what I actually wanted to say earlier, two examples of what is generally considered art, but interesting in our conversation. The one is about 100 years ago. Chagall was one of the first who created serial art, like, for example, his famous lithographies. So you have 50 pieces numbered 1 to 50, sometimes even with a pre-series numbered 1 to 10. It was a revolution in the art scene of 100 years ago, because suddenly an artist could finally make a living of what he was doing. But all 50 are considered an original. But in theory, there is no reason not to make 500 or 5,000 copies of the whole thing. The lithographic process is able to do that. So just the uniqueness that there is just one instance seems to not be decisive in terms of is it art or not. And another example about what is the tool, about 25 years ago, I had a friend who was making art, and he was really good. And he was making art from tree trunks, entire tree trunks. And he was using a chainsaw for that. So quite an elaborate tool. Actually, a little bit unfortunate, because eventually he fell under one of his pieces, toppled over and slayed him. But eventually, that doesn't hurt.
Eventually, that piece probably costed the most of money, however cynical it sounds.
Yeah, that probably is considered the greatest piece of art by the author.
Yeah, it combines the halo effect with actual art.
Yeah,
but the still, if it is art, if you use an elaborate tool of the trade at the time, I mean, there was nothing better than a chainsaw for what he was doing. Then why not use the most elaborate tool, for example, for creating images or for creating text?
That makes sense.
That raises a very interesting question. How much of that tool's output is yours, and how much is actually the output of the tool itself? That's a very interesting question, because there can be a balance when you can say, okay, that's not your creation, that's actually tool's creation. So this precision of details, like whatever, that's not you doing this. That's the tool, so that's not your achievement.
Exactly. So if you take
this balance is tricky.
if you take a hammer, which is a classical tool, like if you take a sculptor's kind of, like a sculpting tool set, those are tools, but they're powerful but simple, right? A chainsaw is powerful but simple. It's very predictable. It's a fairly linear function how it works. It's not a complicated. It's not an unpredictable tool. It's a very easy to control tool. Even like a brush, like an artist has very good control over like what kind of brush he's going to use and how exactly the brush behaves. He knows exactly how it behaves, right? And I'm sure that guy was very skilled with a chainsaw, right? And exactly how it behaves. But compare that to AI, which you cannot control at that level of granularity, right? Which is a complex function. So I think there's a distinction of kind there.
Yeah, it's also the
What about the ray
appreciation
tracing?
of the skill with the tool. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have a polished stone, you have a sculpture, and this sculpture is very well polished. You have two options. You can polish it with a modern rotational, some kind of polishing machines. I have no idea how to call them in English, but you understand what I'm talking about, with abrasive surfaces. So you can polish it in a very simple manner, and even the person without lots of skill can actually do that. Or you can polish it with a chisel. Which one of those would be more appreciated? And which one of those would be considered an art piece which was polished, like by a master? The one with the chisel.
Let's
That's it.
throw the Turing test at it. If you don't tell people which one is which one.
Yeah, that's a very good one. Yeah, that's the point. But you always tell a story with a piece of art. That's, by the way, another point. A piece of art has a story. Like Mona Lisa has a story, right? You can say something about it. You can say something about the history, about the process of creation, about the personality of the author. All of that adds up.
Yeah,
Mona Lisa is a really interesting example because the main reason why Mona Lisa is so famous is not about the work itself, but because it was stolen from the Louvre a couple of times.
It still works. It's a story.
Yeah, but it's not Leonardo's story.
Well, so I think one point here is that art is fictional, yeah, but it has a deep connection to reality, right? The person who made it was real. There was a historical and cultural context within which it was made, societal context. There was real materials that were used and stuff. It has a real deep connection to the real physical, the tangible, the historic, all of that. I think if you talk about this AI stuff, including videos, that sometimes I cannot tell that it was made by an AI. Like I really have to, like, because there's a lot of low quality short form content anyway. I really feel like look for it saying Sora or like VO3 or something, like really saying that before I could tell. So even though I'm failing that Turing test, right, in short form video content, I would still say that the difference, the thing I do not appreciate about those videos is they don't give me an insight into reality or how the world works, right? They're pure fantasies, and
Did you
so
did you just invent the reverse Turing test?
Well, I think so. So there's a couple of points to be made. That one is around the Turing test. Yeah, like so if you take the average person, they may not be able to tell, right? You should take experts, right? So the other thing is with short form content, you cannot interact with the piece, and like it's like if you take a longer form piece of video, like if there's this 3-minute video, you can tell if it's AI or not AI for sure. Like Coke made an ad. I think I shared that on with AI, and you could tell very easily it's AI. Like there were some things that didn't quite make sense in there, you know. And as Google also made an ad with AI, and you can tell it's AI, right? They probably put millions of compute dollars into doing that, and it was still you could still tell. And I think in general, like I shared this, like the voices, like so 11 Labs came out with this very cool thing where they're replicating like voices of people, including Richard Feynman and people like that, Michael Caine, many people. So like when you listen to those, you're like, oh, like it sounds kind of close, but not at all. Like so, so if you download the app, the 11 Labs app, they're turning that into like an AI-powered audiobook reader. Okay, so you have AI that these voices, including these famous voices that'll read, and they have like Sir Oliver or something who is like a very good Shakespearean actor, right? Whose voice they've done, and like you can get these people to read an audiobook, but when it's reading it, you're like, you don't really understand the book you're reading. Like when I hear how you're reading it, which is the AI, you don't really understand this book that you're reading. Like you're mouthing noises in this probabilistic way based on an arrangement of words, but you don't really understand what you're reading, right? And even when we talk about audiobooks, people prefer audiobooks read by the author than read by a third-person narrator, because they know that the author actually understands the book that they're reading, and that is conveyed in the author is not the best voice actor, right? If you look at the quality of the quality of form is worse when the author reads the book, for sure, right? But people prefer it because it conveys the meaning and the essence and the connection to reality that was intended to be conveyed in that book, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes you can
that's
get
about empathizing. That's exactly empathizing.
and it's more than just empathy. I think there's a deep yearning to connect and gain insight about reality and the truth in the world, not go into some la fantasy land. Like I think people misunderstand art as this drive towards the surreal, and the fantastical. But I think if art did not convey insight about reality and help us with the here and now problems that we face, either emotional or material or whatever, we would not consume it. That art is a function, right? And that function is a relation in a deep and a real sense to our lives. And sometimes that function can be that somebody's art is very different than our own, but we can see the commonality. We can see that it's coming from, because at the end of the day, it's created by human brain, and human brains are quite similar because human genetics are quite similar, and we can every language can be translated, every art piece can be understood to a greater or lesser degree. And I think it's that deep yearning to connect to reality that's at the heart of this. And I don't think that something that is produced by an approximator, however sophisticated, will get us there. And that's why these AI voices, when they're reading audiobooks, to me, it doesn't work. Like, it doesn't work.
Yeah, by the way,
If we add one word, then I think we have a point, and that is what people really yearn is to connect to the emotional reality. That friend I mentioned earlier, who thought of herself as an artist, she said art is what causes deep emotions. Not like the impulse to buy another can of Coke. Deep emotions, like trying to understand life, the universe, and everything, or something like that. Deep love, deep hate, whatever.
Yeah, but then there is a very fine line between connecting to deep emotion and just triggering some emotions for the sake of getting the reaction from the person. There's a very fine line there, and also there is a very fine line there in terms of having a skilled creation with creativity and imagination of the author, which creates deep emotion, and just something striking or challenging whatever it wants to challenge for the sake of creating emotion. The second one is not art. It just challenges you, whatever. Yeah, it's striking, but it's not art. If it does not have imagination, creativity, and skill, only triggering the emotion, it's not art. It's like, the modern sculptures, which are of, I don't know, it was like 5 years ago or something like that. There was some kind of sculpture over a female police officer peeing on the floor, and it won the some kind of awards, and it was literally made with a mannequin. There's no art there. It just triggers some emotions from certain type of people, nothing more. But anybody could do that, and there is no deeper meaning in that. It just literally just triggers a certain emotions, politically biased from certain people, nothing more.
Can I say one thing, Josef?
But it has a nice story.
I think there is one side of, like, just doing things for the shock factor, right? There's a lot of, like, you can see on social media, there's a lot of trends around, like, doing weird things and filming them and seeing people, or pranking people and seeing their reactions, right? We don't consider all of that art, even though it produces lots of emotions, sometimes angry and annoyed emotions in the people who are subject. Yeah. But if you take art, I think art can. I think if I take more like mainstream historical view of it, I think art triggers worship. okay, in the eye of the beholder. There's a sense of awe that it inspires. So if you take Douglas Hofstadter's like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? It's not producing so many emotions, but there's a sense of inspiration, a sense of wonder, a sense of possibility. Or you look at Isaac Asimov's Foundation series, right? It gives us a sense of what could be, right? It's not, I didn't get like so many emotions reading that, right? But I certainly felt inspired and expanded in a
Yeah.
sense of awe. And I think that emotions can be a part of art. I think they often are. But I think reducing art to emotions gets to sentimentalism, which I don't think that is sufficient for art.
Yeah,
I
and
don't
you
even
missed
think
one
it's
word.
necessary. Yeah, go
You
ahead.
missed one word, Sheikh. The word is beauty. It inspires awe and beauty, and it shows you beauty. That's the point. Yeah, you can immediately argument. Yeah, there is art which is horrible, like for example, I don't know, Giger,
Lovecraft and
for
Giga.
example, art. Lovecraft, Giger, absolutely art, no doubt, absolutely art. But still, art is about beauty, and it inspires you because it's also beautiful. And that's why you look at, again, I'm not a very religious person, to say the least, but there is a notion in uh, there was this notion in Catholicism that you can inspire people with beauty. That's why they're building beautiful chapels. That's why they're making that's why those Renaissance artists were creating those sculptures to show their appreciation of God, to show the beauty of religion, to show something to aspire to, and again, in the life of people, again, which was much darker than ours, to say the least. At the time, they were showing something beautiful, so that they come to a place with God and they could appreciate it, they can get inspired, and without even conveying sense with Bible, because they were often speaking Latin and nobody in the room could understand Latin, whatever. They still inspired because you could see all these beautiful things around you. You appreciated the work that was required to do that. You could feel the ideas, you could see the ideas without even hearing them. That's the idea. That's art. That's actually art.
I have the perfect response. So I think actually art is worship. Okay, the act of creating art is worship. It's you're expressing gratitude, right? You're expressing gratitude to what is, right? You're grateful. You are sacrificing yourself and your effort. Like that's why we care about handmade and exquisite detail, because there's an element of self-sacrifice in the production of art. That's also why we admire great athletes, because there's a lot, we understand the sacrifice involved. Without this sacrifice, it would not be great. There's a sense, and that is a purely religious idea, that there is self-sacrifice, there is gratitude, there is a sense of worship. So I think art itself, the act of creating art is worship. And I think there's also the deep pain of the artist conveyed. That's like, there's a lot of pain in art. Um, that's part of the truth of it. But I don't think it can be art without sacrifice and without the worship, without a surrender to something greater, without like talking about something that transcends us and it's greater than us and is beyond us. So I think that is why art functionally works the way to me it's an acting out of what religion preaches about, like how to be.
There is one. Okay, there is one interesting thought I have about that, and that is the idea of sacrifice. There has been a political comedian in Germany 30 years ago who was talking about that very point. He was basically explaining that in his worldview, art has to do with sacrifice, and it has to do with suffering. And then he goes on to explain that political concept, and he explains here, and he explains there, and suddenly he says, "Do you see how I'm suffering?" And it was a lot of fun. But I believe the suffering is not a necessary ingredient of art. Actually, it's the Asian culture, as far as it has been translated in my world, that has a much nicer concept. It's not a sacrifice. Like when you talk about sacrifice, you talk about what is yours, and you're giving it away somewhere. What is more interesting concept is an offering. I take something, it may be mine, it may be from wherever, and I give it to somebody, like I give it to my audience. And it's the recipient in focus and not the person who's giving it. And
I don't.
I like that idea a lot more. When I'm thinking about making something in the direction of artistic, I'm thinking about the people I want to, as we said, the people I want to inspire, the people where I want to create curiosity, the people I want to get to move on, I want to get to act, to do something. I'm not thinking about how I'm suffering.
So I think I fundamentally disagree with this point. I think so.
Okay.
I think audience worship is pandering, and there's a lot of pandering in our world. We don't consider any of it. I think art is always towards the greater, not to the lesser. Um, I think so. So I think fundamentally, our art is a worship of what is greater, and not a pandering to the needs of what is kind of the audience, and that we call that pandering, and we understand that well. And I think I don't know of any great art examples of great artists where there was not a lot of self-sacrifice. I don't even know that they would. I think part of their fame is like look at Kafka. Okay, Kafka is one example. Look at Tolstoy. Tolstoy carried a gun and thought about shooting himself a lot. I don't know why the details of it, but that's part of the mythology, right? Look at even when we talk about like physics, like chemistry, physics, like you can look at Marie Curie and stuff. They were like they literally were harming themselves with radiation in their science. Right? Look at Edison, right? Edison, of course, perseverance, but Tesla, Nikola Tesla, also considered kind of an artist, right? He kind of and look at Da Vinci, right? He kind of this thing, but even look at Indian ones like Rumi, or for example, right? Rumi was a very joyful poet. He writes very joyfully, but he sacrificed everything. It's part of the Indian tradition of monasticism, right? He was a monastic. He didn't have a family. He didn't. They lived as monastics. They sacrificed their worldly existence in worship, right? So I don't know if any exceptions of great artists where we say they did not significantly sacrifice
Salvador
and
Dali.
well so you look at somebody like Picasso, Dali, right? They lived extravagant lives. I think we can agree with this, but they were really dedicated and driven by their art and their commitment to the extremities of their art. Like it took them to places that were far beyond any human requirements, right? Like no
I
human, yeah. And we see one last point. We see a lot of artists who create the stuff they know is not going to get popular, maybe in their lifetime, maybe in many lifetimes, right? Because they're worshiping something greater that has not yet been understood. And like Bach was not popular during his lifetime very much. There were many examples of this, and the art was much more important to them than pandering to an audience, and that caught on as true art, and that survived, and the pandering sort of stuff doesn't survive.
I
think
think
I
that
make yeah. Please,
you go.
Joseph. I want to make probably the final point. So please say whatever you want to say.
I just wanted to say that aspect of being driven, that is definitely a key ingredient.
Yeah, so basically what we see here is discussing the question of art. We went through concepts of sacrifice, worship, conflict of whether skill or not skill, whether expression or not expression, so on and so forth. All those concepts and ideas are characteristics of humans. This conflict of humans' ideas and their representation in the piece of art is exactly, however conflicting it is, however shocking or not shocking, however inspiring or not inspiring. Was there sacrifice, or was it Salvador Dali? Was there worship of beauty or worship of something ugly? All of that are human concepts, human interaction, and essentially human ideas. So when we're using AI, all those human ideas are irrelevant because it's created by algorithm. So if there is no representation and involvement of human in the process, and there is no conflict, like search for truth, for example, there is no conflict for of those ideas, we don't consider it art, essentially. So this is where we find art, in the conflict of those ideas.
I think there's something very deep about what you said. Like when we're talking about machine-created things, they don't have to make the same trade-offs, right? They don't have to
Yes,
sacrifice their own
they
lives.
they don't feel
Yeah.
same stuff. Like they can mathematically calculate the existence of certain concept in a certain piece of work. Absolutely, they can do it. They can even notice stuff that you don't notice because they're smarter. Easily, they can do this stuff, but they don't feel it like the human. And you, as a human, want to empathize with other humans. That's why you may not consider whatever they create a piece of art, though technically on every level it can be more superior.
So I'll say something else that's adjacent to that. So like I think another way to conceive of art is it's a relationship between the finite, we are the finite, and the infinite, which is like the universe. Like like the scale of the universe is so vast and the time spans are so long and that functionally it is infinite for us. So like it is this relation of the finite to the infinite. Now, AI does not participate in that because it does not have finitude. You can make more copies of it, right? As many copies as you want. You can spin them up, spin them down, train new ones. So it doesn't have finitude built into it. In fact, functionally, that's what makes it powerful. So I think there is something very deep about the fact that we are finite and we relate to a world that is infinite, and that is the perennial problem of humanity. And it comes up in AI and other things as a frame problem, like what you focus on, how do you do it, and that's solved by attention. Apparently, you can solve it algorithmically pretty well. But it is still something that we uniquely experience as living beings that are each one of a kind, right? In particular time, place, and circumstances, that we are finite and our lives are finite, and we know this, and we are relating to infinity, and it's tragic that we are finite and we're in love with and enchanted by and in worship of infinity, that we have to only participate in a small way. And I think that's kind of art.
And I think that at this point we're probably done.
Well, thank you, everyone. We began by talking about AI slop, and then, of course, to define what AI slop is, we had to try to define what not AI slop is. So we got into discussing what true art is and how that contrasts with the algorithmic kind that is very pervasive today and pernicious. And we hope that there will be some degree of pushback by recognition of ourselves, which I think in all of this technological advancement, including AI, I think we're failing to recognize ourselves in our humanity. I think we recognize that we're intelligent and all of that, and we're building these digital intelligences. But I think we're failing to recognize our fullness and our full humanity in this endeavor. And I think that's creating a schism in how we're approaching things, and the lack of meaningfulness that's coming out of it. We're like this, but this is kind of mean, and why that is. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we will continue these. But yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.